Yeah, hello, this is Sania, and today, very eminent digital humanities experts, Brett Chambers and Collie Fulford from North Carolina State University are with me. Thank you very much, Brett and Collie, for joining me in third SISS Faculty Conversation series. Today, we are going to talk about a very important and interesting topic on digital humanities, and it's really important to talk about digital humanities in this lockdown when everyone have a fear of not being productive. So digital humanities as a field needs to ask about what good online pedagogy is. So before starting our discussion, it's important to demystify the concept of digital humanities. And because digital humanities help us to present the old concepts in a new way. And it's an emerging interdisciplinary movement which looks to enhance and redefine traditional humanities scholarships through digital means. So today we will talk about digital humanities, digital pedagogy in the time of pandemic, and we will talk about the reflections and resources on digital humanities. So as we all know, in the COVID-19 as a pandemic has prompted a range of reflections and resources related to digital humanities, digital pedagogy, digital data visualization and online collections. So regarding all this, my first question is to my dear colleague, Collie. How do you see digital humanities role in this pandemic, and which tools can be helpful in digital pedagogy with minimal technical expertise required? So now over to you, Collie, and later on I will turn to Brett with a new question.
Let me take the first part of your very rich question, and that is the role of potential role for digital humanities.
Can't hear you, Collie.
Okay. I'm unmuted or just quiet? Can you hear me?
Just barely.
Okay, I'll speak up. Can you hear me? Can you hear me better? All right. I want to take the first part of your question about the digital humanities role during the time of a pandemic. And this actually is language around humanities that Brett has been really helped form in my heart, is the sense that digital humanities focuses first, let's flip it. It's the humanities perspective on this digital life that we are all living. And we were doing this before the pandemic. But with the pandemic, it has created a much more intense focus on our digital lives and how much of our full humanity we are having to express in these narrow frames, such as a Zoom conference, and reaching out to people and communicating not in person, but in these other digital ways. So I think the role of the digital humanities during the time of the pandemic is to foreground the humanities, recognize, and I was talking with a colleague earlier this week, and she said that every statistic that's coming across our news feed represents a person. You know, we're hearing about deaths, we're hearing about illnesses, we're hearing about suffering. These are that we have to like pause and think that these statistics represent people. We may not know them personally, but these are people in the entire globe who matter in this world. And so that pause to recognize the humanity, to recognize the stories of the people who are suffering from the illness and the economic fallout, that is part of the role of the digital humanities. I think that has been the role of the digital humanities before the pandemic, was to recognize that all the statistics are derived at through gathering of data, and that is flawed in many ways because we are human beings with very different perspectives, and we have to have a scholar's question and gaze upon those facts and figures and stats and think about, well, how do they matter to us as a species? You know, what are we as humanities people, you know, when we are, and so the digital humanities allows us to work with data, it allows us to express data, it allows us to question data, and allows us to be citizens of the world together and reaching out across the globe as we are doing now through tools that enable scholars and citizens to be together even though we are far apart. Or, even though Brett and I can't meet in person on our campus right now, and we can still meet with you in Pakistan, which is pretty miraculous.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You rightly pointed out. But as we were in North Carolina, and we used many tools, and in which I would like to important tools, and we are using being a digital humanities scholars, and in which the Umeka, Scholar, and the Drupal, these are very important tools. And if we see Umeka is very important for the web publishing platform from the archives, scholarly collections, and the exhibitions. And at the same time, we see Scholar is also the open source, and which help us for the publishing platform, and that's designed to make it easy for the authors to write long form and bone digital scholarships online. And Drupal is also very important, which we can talk more about it. And it's also an open source for content management for the digital humanities project. No doubt, these are very important tools which we can use in this pandemic, and we can boost our research, and we can also enhance our digital pedagogies. So thank you very much, for your input. So now my question is to Brett. So Brett, we know in the age of virality, it appears that the only thing that travels faster among the humans, as Collie said, that then novel coronavirus is the information which we can gather from anywhere. And now with the exponential spread of the COVID-19 cases in recent weeks, stories and data about the various about the various issues, and particularly about the virus, are everywhere on the social media, in the media, and also we can see that it's also filling up preprint databases. So how do you see the data visualization and the impact of digital humanities in the time of pandemic? So now over to you, Brett.
Well, thank you. It's so good to see you again, and good to see my friend and colleague, Collie. One of the things, if you go to the group chat, if you go to Zoom chat, you can pull up one of the examples, because there's so many different ways to use data. And because data is just a way of telling a story. It's all about narrative for me. I come at it from a journalistic standpoint, and as a researcher, from my training is in public policy. So we look at the narrative from the political standpoint, the economic standpoint, the business standpoint. And it's an interdisciplinary approach to it. And what we're trying to do is find and use the data that most appropriately shares the narrative and helps us explain the narrative. So it's a non-siloed or less siloed, different ways to show it. So you can show charts and whatnot. And the digital part of digital humanities is just that's just a digital tool. If you know how to do a good chart on a board with chalk or with an erase, a dry erase, that's an analog version of it, but it's still just using data to tell the narrative, to support the narrative. And that's where the digital humanities part comes into play. I show some examples to my students. One that's actually about, it has to do with linguistics, which is that's not like my expertise, but it does, it's from the World Atlas of Language Structures. And you can, the link is over on this in the chat, but you can go to that and it shows you the languages of the world, but then you can click on which types of languages there are. So whether it's Indo-European, Niger-Congo, Afro-Asiatic, there's a lot of different ones that you can click on, so that students can see where these languages are spoken, because some people would think Niger-Congo is only spoken on the continent of Africa, but then they see it spoken in other places. So there's a lot of different ways to show the give you the representation of whatever it is that you want to do. If I'm doing one of the other ones I like is the most valuable sports teams. And, you know, you have American football and European football, or soccer as we know it at, hockey, basketball, baseball. And it gives a visual representation with color and everything else, so people can get it a lot faster to give a bigger overall. Then you can go into the details. So the visual part just helps people absorb the overall concept faster, and then you can go to the details. And depending on how you have it set up, then you can go in and get those details and use those details as evidence-based evidence to support your narrative. My students, for the pedagogy of it, I use the night timeline, and when they use that, they're, you know, I can't go to them and say, "Hey, I need you to do a spreadsheet and then convert it to a time." They're like, "No." So, but what I say is, "Hey, I want you to pick an event." I ask them 15. If they go over 20, I'm not going to stop you. Just don't go too far, you know. And it's been really interesting. Without a lot of training and just walking them through, showing them that the night site has, them are going to choose some musical artist, and that's okay. And you let them go do what they do, and then they go do it, and they have such fun doing it. But the fun comes not just from doing it and interacting with, learning how to fill out a spreadsheet without telling them you have to fill out a spreadsheet, and watch them go, because they're afraid of numbers, they're afraid of spreadsheets. But when they say, you're going to tell the story about the person or place or event that you're going to pick. And so we had students who picked like their favorite artist, Beyonce. Oh, when they were presenting, they were like, you know, they were all excited about their girl, Beyonce. Somebody else did a presentation about the Black Panthers, which is a group that was out of Oakland, California. And they showed this narrative, and they used visuals from things where they had to go research, and they put those, present that kind of information was really cool. And because we had to do the switch from face-to-face to online, this semester they had to do that presentation in Zoom. And they had, I mean, they still had the same energy, well, not the same energy, but they had more energy for that presentation than they did just for regular class, because one, they took control of the narrative and they were able to tell a story that they chose, so they had a certain sense of agency. And then once they told us, as they were telling the story, you could tell that they were excited about the fact that they picked who they wanted or what they wanted to do their piece on. Two, they did the research. And three, they did the presentation, and they were able to get feedback from their classmates. And so those are the kinds of things, you know, from the presentation of it in the media that we consume, whether it's academic journal or whether we're watching CNN, Fox, or, you know, CNBC, and watching the business information. So it's a way to get that information across to humans. Like, I want to always point out that the human part of digital humanities is still about humans, and how do we get information communicate with one another.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brett. It's really good to engage students. It's really good to engage students use digital humanities tools in this pandemic, and it will be more interesting for them to present their presentation, and also it will be justice with the course as well. So if I will relate with international relations students, and no doubt our students are also discussing about different history issues, and they are also talking about the World War I, World War II, and all this. So if we give them project on digital humanities tool, for example, which we learned in North Carolina, which is the night lab, so we can ask them to prepare their projects through a night lab, and it will be interesting for them to present and to make their project, and it will be a great learning experience for them as well. And if I move on, and my second question is to you, Brett, as well, and it's related to the e-research. How do you see essential is e-research, and how can we achieve this better through digital humanities, and how we can utilize all these digital humanities source and projects which has been published by the different digital humanities lab across the globe?
Well, the nice thing about whether it's research for an academic journal or research for a news article or research for a class project, we have more access, and we've had a lot of access. It's just that now we can't leave the house, in theory, to go do the research. So now we're forced to use online tools to do it. And when we do that, you notice I avoid using the word digital, because digital is all of it's just a tool. So whether it's a book, whether we're using a book or we're using a phone, these are just tools for us. These are just different ways of accessing information. So one is analog, one is digital, but it's still, at the end, our goal is to get accurate and compelling information to tell a compelling story. So I use the access not just to the website itself, but we have a lot of credible sources online. Museums now have some incredible, absolutely incredible exhibits that are online that you can access online. Something as simple as when the lockdown first occurred, and I'm originally from Washington, D.C., blossoms, which reminded me about the last conversation we had was about cherry blossoms. So I get a little sentimental. Washington had a cherry blossom camp, and so phone. So that's access. Now let's say if I were doing some, whether I was a biologist and I wanted to do something about the biology and the history of the cherry blossom and the relationship, as opposed to just talking about it, I could take them to that and show them the result of the relationship between Japan and Washington. And now that gives it a little bit more weight, gives it a little bit more, it tells the narrative a little bit better. If I wanted to talk about sports teams, I could drop the link that I have up there in the chat. I could drop that link, and then people would see the most valuable sports teams. I think, Americans may think, oh, the Dallas Cowboys. Nope, it's not. It could be one of the many baseball teams or the soccer teams over in Europe, that are the most valuable teams. And then how many championships have they won? Simple things like that people want to know. So the access is great. The access is where the digital part comes in, because we can access visual pieces, we can access spreadsheets, we can access narratives and qualitative data, not just quantitative data, and we can access the visual data, and then we can put it together to put that narrative together the way we want to do it.
I completely agree with you, Brett. I would like you, Collie, to comment on it. So would you like to comment on it, please?
Sure. In terms of shifting to more predominantly digital research, this year I've been fortunate to work with undergraduate research teams, and our shift during COVID has been to work remotely, as the three of us are doing now, and also to amplify my use of collaboration tools. So this, I think the research tools, I do interview-based research with my teams, and so our interviews have moved from face-to-face to Zoom or telephone. And then the collaborations that my student teams and I are doing relate very much to classroom practices, and I'm using the same tools that I'm using to interact with my students collaboratively on classroom projects. So I'm valuing my ability to co-author with colleagues, with graduate students, with undergraduate students, by composing on Google Docs and other kinds of shared document platforms. And by using Jamboard is something that I was introduced to relatively recently. And I'm a big, normally in a classroom, I'm up at the whiteboard with my students. We're drawing on the board. We're like expressing ourselves in a very kind of popcorn method of like getting ideas out really quickly, then synthesize research, and a big part of my teaching. And I found that Jamboard is a tool that allows even from 2 people to a very large group to pop ideas out in digital sticky notes on pages, so that we can look and see what everybody is thinking and move them around and cluster the concepts. I'm working on this absolutely this week with a research team, and they're amazing. They're very fast. It's very intuitive. It doesn't take any training. It takes exploration. And I think exploration is a really excellent pedagogy anyway. So, I can just say, hey, you guys want to try this tool? And we just muck around in it and we try it out and find that we're able to start figuring out what are some of the themes that are coming up in the interviews that we're examining. What are some of the ideas that and assumptions that we are bringing to the research ourselves? So those are 2 tools that I've found really useful in the process of learning and thinking and doing iterative analysis, both in teaching and in research. There's these other tools that I think we want to express our research, and we don't. I think one of the things about COVID is this sense of urgency around expression. Like at the same time that I'm going through the scholarly process of slow peer review at journals of record, I'm at the same time really, really interested in joining the public access materials out. So website building right now, so people can express their humanity and the humanities strands of their research. Very important. So for example, one of my student researchers is taking from our data, from interview transcripts, he's composing and editing a website, inviting other writers to it, so that they can take the knowledge base of the participants in the study and create small posts that dynamically and expressively put a face to the person, put a narrative to the person, and help our findings get out to other students. They're pitched not for scholars, they're pitched for other kinds of readers. So I think that this time of COVID is a time of it's moving fast, it's moving deep, and we want to be able to be part of a global conversation. We want to share our findings quicker. I feel this sense of anything could happen tomorrow. I want to be in conversation with other scholars, and I want to be in conversation with many students across the world and share findings. So using Jamboard and Google Docs for figuring out what we know, and using smart ways of cleaning our expression up and making it attractive and appealing. We worked last year together using Canva as a very easy way for people to make things that look good, right? It's a design tool that's any kind of tool that you can download as an app is a tool that is more accessible to students, even when they're having difficulty with access with wider bandwidth. So Canva on the phone and website builders that come on the phone, these are the kinds of tools that help us teach, learn, research, and express the research findings.
And I like to echo something that Collie talked about, because she was talking about um, e- the exploration
Yeah.
part. And I think that sometimes we don't talk about the exploration. Everybody's trying to get everything right so much, and then when they get out into the real world, assuming they ever leave academia, uh, they it's an entirely different kind of mindset. Is uh, go fast, break early, and figure it out. And it's all about the process and developing a new question. The answers come the answers that they're generally looking for come as a result of trying something different. You know, most of the vaccines that we have came from something else, that somebody was exploring something else, and it was a result of that. And then they said, oh, let's just try this and see what happens. And it's like, oh my God, it worked. You know, so it's not because your answers are dependent on what question you ask. There was somebody that was he was a president of an organization, and somebody asked him a question at my alma mater about like what advice could he give them, and he said, we need for you students to fail early, fail fast, fail often, so you understand how to make the adjustments, so you understand how to change your question, understand that you don't have to be right all the time. And the right part is not the most important part all the time, but how do you get to the right answer? And you could have, all the students in the audience just went, you know, it's like, how dare you say, and the professors too. But his point was well taken by a lot of the professionals because of the fact that in this new day and age, the even us folks in higher ed, we had to we didn't have a choice about whether we were afraid to, um, you know, to stumble a little bit. We just had to take our courses and change them. You know, we didn't have time to go, oh, well, let's see, I don't really feel I can do it. No, you just had to do it. And was it perfect? Probably not. But we got through it, and now we've learned. That's what we learned. And the irony is that's how we deal with our students. We give them things that they have no idea about what to do. We even if we give them the most elaborate rubrics and we give them the most elaborate, like, you know, how to do it, they still stumble. But if we're to do, and here's some tools to do it, sometimes they come up with a faster way than our rubric and our step-by-step sheet does. And so from a pedagogy standpoint, I think that many of us educators are seeing that, hey, here's the night tool, do a timeline, you pick the people, you pick the event, the directions are there, but do it your way. And some of the things that I was able to get from my class, and some of my students like, you know what, that was actually pretty easy, and it was a lot of fun. You know, yeah, I know. Who knew, right? You know, them having fun learning because they were in control of, you know, they had agency, respect of their interests. So it's not me as the instructor coming in saying, hey, you're going to do these timelines, and I have this list of 5 things, you pick one. Chambers. But when they got to pick it, it started off with, I'm not sure what I want to do. But then they kind of got into it. Then they picked something they really liked. And boom, you know, done. And so this whole break fast, break early, break often, and go ahead and then just rebuild it. That's the part I find very endearing about this, you know, you talk about digital humanities, and then in this time of pandemic, is that we don't have time to overthink this. All we have time to do is try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. If that doesn't work, so we just keep on trying. It's like think, design, do. That's all we can do. Think, design, do.
Thank you very much, Collie, and thank you very much, Brett, for sharing your experience and enlightening our viewers about digital humanities in this pandemic, how they can come over their fears for being not productive. And I must say, like, the COVID-19 pandemic has magnified the importance of digital humanities and accessible digital tools for those locked out of traditional archive repositories. So as we know, suddenly online becoming the default means of teaching ubiquitously in school and higher education institutions, and digital humanities have much to contribute as a response to the pandemic, and they can sustain us in the times of the quarantine and the social distancing. So being digital humanities scholars, I am very happy that I'm using all these tools during my classroom. And it's really important to engage students in this pandemic, and might be we can overcome the effect of COVID-19 pandemic during digital pedagogy. In fact, I will say pandemic pedagogy. So thank you very much, Brett, and thank you very much, Collie, for joining me, and thank you very much once again.